Imagine standing at the edge of a vast emptiness that stretches beyond the horizon, a territory so immense it could swallow the entire United States, yet so deserted that you could walk for days without encountering another human being. This is Australia, where 95% of the land lies empty, untamed, and mysterious. But here's what's truly mind-bending. This isn't some poor, underdeveloped nation. This is one of the world's wealthiest countries, with technology, resources, and capabilities that rival any modern society. So why would such an advanced nation leave so much of its territory uninhabited? The answer will take us on an extraordinary journey through time, space, and human history, a tale so remarkable it almost defies belief. But before we dive in, let me share something that will blow your mind. There's a single cattle ranch in Australia, Anna Creek Station, that's larger than the entire nation of Israel. Yet this massive expanse of land is typically managed by just 8 people. Think about that for a moment. A piece of land bigger than a whole country, watched over by a group smaller than a soccer team. But that's just the beginning of Australia's fascinating contradictions. Let's put this emptiness into perspective with some numbers that will make your head spin. Imagine England. Now multiply its population by 2. That's still fewer people than live in just the city of Tokyo. Yet England could fit into Australia 32 times over. Or consider this. The Indonesian island of Java has 6 times Australia's population despite being 60 times smaller. In fact, there are 7 islands in the world, each dramatically smaller than Australia, that have more people than this entire continent country. Want something even more mind-bending? The state of Western Australia occupies 1/3 of the continent. Within it, there's a region called East Pilbara that's the same size as Japan, a country of 125 million people. How many people live in East Pilbara? Just 10,500. And half of them live in a single small town called Newman. Imagine having the space of Japan, but with the population of a small suburban neighborhood. But here's where our story takes an unexpected turn. You might think Australia is empty because it lacks resources or water. Yet surprisingly, Australia has twice as much renewable freshwater as Pakistan, a country with 8 times its population. It has more arable land than Indonesia, Malaysia, Singapore, Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos combined, countries that together host over 540 million people. So what's going on? Why would a wealthy, developed nation with abundant resources leave 95% of its territory virtually uninhabited? The answer lies in one of the most fascinating combinations of geography, climate, and human history ever to shape a continent. Our story begins not thousands, but hundreds of millions of years ago. Australia is the oldest continental landmass on Earth, and that's not just a fun fact, it's the key to understanding its emptiness. This extreme age has cursed Australia with what scientists called a geological old age syndrome. Imagine leaving a piece of bread out in the sun for days. It becomes dry, hard, and nutrient depleted. Now imagine that process happening to an entire continent over millions of years. That's essentially what's happened to Australia. The soil has been leached of nutrients for so long that much of it is practically useless for agriculture. But the continent's age created another, even more dramatic problem. Unlike other continents, Australia has had no major mountain building events for over 250 million years. This means the continent is extraordinarily flat, so flat that it fundamentally breaks the normal patterns of rainfall that other continents enjoy. And this brings us to what might be called the perfect storm of geographic bad luck. Australia sits in precisely the wrong place for rain formation. To the west, cold Antarctic currents sweep up along the coast, too cold to generate the evaporation needed for rainfall. To the east, the Great Dividing Range, Australia's longest mountain chain, creates a rain shadow effect that prevents moisture from reaching the interior. But it gets even more fascinating. Australia straddles the Tropic of Capricorn, placing it in the path of global atmospheric patterns that actively suppress rainfall. It's as if nature itself conspired to create the perfect conditions for a continent-sized desert. The results are dramatic. 2/3 of Australia receives less than 500 millimeters of annual rainfall. For comparison, London gets nearly twice that amount. But here's the cruel twist. When rain does come to Australia, it often arrives in devastating floods. The northern regions can receive more rain in a single day than London gets in a year, only to go without any rainfall for months afterward. But the story of Australia's emptiness isn't just about geography and climate. The human history is equally fascinating and starts with an extraordinary fact. When the first European settlers arrived in 1788, they found a continent that had been isolated from the rest of humanity for over 50,000 years. The Aboriginal Australians had developed sophisticated techniques to survive in this harsh environment, maintaining a delicate balance with the land. But their total population might have been as low as 650,000 people, at a time when Asia already had 650 million inhabitants. Think about that contrast for a moment. One person in Australia for every 1,000 in Asia. The arrival of European settlers brought its own dramatic chapter to this story. While other New World territories were receiving millions of immigrants, Australia's extreme isolation made it a less attractive destination. The journey was longer, more dangerous, and more expensive than traveling to the Americas. Today, Australia faces a unique set of challenges that continue to keep its interior empty. Climate change is intensifying the continent's already extreme weather patterns. 9 of Australia's 10 hottest years on record have occurred since 2005. The Murray-Darling Basin, Australia's largest river system, carries only 1/22nd of the water flow of the Mississippi River system. Yet despite these challenges, Australia has found remarkable ways to thrive. The country is among the world's leading agricultural producers, with enough arable land to potentially support 90 million people, more than 3 times its current population. Modern technology and agricultural innovations have allowed Australians to turn portions of this harsh land into productive territory. Looking ahead, Australia's population is projected to reach around 36 million by 2050, still leaving vast stretches of the continent virtually uninhabited. This unique pattern of human settlement, a nation of cities surrounded by enormous empty spaces, may well become a model for human adaptation to extreme environments in an era of climate change. The extremes are striking. 85% of Australians live within just 50 kilometers of the coastline, making it one of the world's most urbanized nations. The country's 5 major cities, Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide, account for 2/3 of the entire population, all clustered along the more habitable coastal regions. Perhaps the most dramatic way to understand Australia's emptiness is to take a drive through it. If you were to drive from Esperance in the south to Kununurra in the north, both within the same state of Western Australia, you'd need to set aside 36 hours of non-stop driving time. During this epic 3,200-kilometer journey, you'd pass by fewer than 70,000 people. That's like driving from Madrid to Istanbul and encountering only a small town's worth of inhabitants along the way. This journey would take you through landscapes that haven't changed in millions of years, vast salt flats, ancient rock formations, and endless horizons where the line between earth and sky becomes indistinct. You'd pass through regions where the nearest neighbor might be hundreds of kilometers away, where the stars at night shine with an intensity city dwellers can barely imagine, and where the silence is so complete it feels like a physical presence. In the end, Australia's emptiness presents us with one of the great paradoxes of our modern world, a highly developed nation that has effectively decided to leave 95% of its territory to nature. It's not that Australians couldn't populate more of their continent. With modern technology and enough determination, humans can live almost anywhere. Rather, they've adapted to work with their environment rather than against it. This makes Australia not just a country or a continent, but a living laboratory for humanity's future. As climate change forces us to reconsider how and where we live, Australia's model of concentrated coastal settlement surrounded by vast empty spaces might become increasingly relevant worldwide. The next time you look at a map of Australia, remember, those vast empty spaces aren't just vacant land. They're a testament to the power of nature to shape human civilization, a reminder that even in our age of technological triumph, there are still places where the ancient rhythms of Earth hold sway. In an increasingly crowded world, Australia stands as a monument to emptiness, a place where the horizon stretches forever and the silence speaks volumes about our relationship with the natural world. This is Australia, where 95% of the land remains empty, not because we can't fill it, but because nature has written its own rules, and sometimes the wisest choice is to listen.